Hey there everybody and welcome back. For those of you that are looking to create a quick, easy, and efficient API alternative for use with your Appgyver application, stay tuned. I'm going to be covering the basics in today's video. Now before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe and check out the channel for new content. Alright, so jumping straight in, this doesn't have to only be used with Appgyver. You can use this with other platforms as well. It's just a way to get your information stored online. Now, a couple of things to go over. We're going to be using the community edition of Appgyver. I have a basic app right here just to show that we're actually getting the data. Then we're going to be using Hostinger as our website builder slash basically like online storage for these files. So you'll see we really just have one sample file here. And then we'll be using the preview app of Appgyver here. I only have Firebase pulled up just to show how I'm actually getting the content for the website that we're going to be setting up. And then lastly is some information on cores for Hostinger, which we'll go over in a minute. So jumping straight in, we have our Appgyver application here. So essentially what we're doing is we're rebuilding a JSON file that we know we can access and kind of restructuring it, adding in our content. That way we can get information dynamically. So what I mean by that is, in this case, if we have our Firestore database, you'll see we have collection 1, collection 2, and these fields. If we were to go to that URL, this is what it would look like here. Now, if you right-click this, you have the ability to save as, and in a case like that, you can actually save it as a JSON file to, let's just say, your desktop. So what I've done with that is we did it this way because I wanted to have that structure. That way I don't have to type everything from scratch. So I use the Firebase setup basically like the template for the website that we're going to be setting up. So you can set yours up however you want. If you know the actual structure for the file that you want to save, then you can go ahead and type out your sample JSON file yourself. It's entirely up to you how you actually get this content here. Now I'll close these two as I no longer need them. And now we're going to go over to Hostinger, which is again basically just that website builder slash online storage. So I have a file for my website it's codelessfix.app, and then in there's a subdomain test. So what I've done is I've dropped the collection JSON file that I was just looking at. You'll notice it looks identical right here. I've dropped that into this test subdomain. So now when I go to this website, it's returning the exact contents of this file. So if I were to add in a couple of letters here and click save, usually within a couple seconds, you'll see that update here. So this is basically what we're going to be using as our, we'll say API alternative. We're going to be hosting our JSON files online. You can quickly edit them in the editor here. So we'll drop in some content and then we'll just edit this and make it a couple of numbers and we'll click save. Then we'll just refresh this page and you'll see things have changed up a little bit. So it's pretty quick as far as the updates to the website itself. So now we're going to learn how to get this added in Appgyver. So in Appgyver, you have a couple of options for APIs. You have this data tab up here, or you have the ability to add in HTTP requests down here. Now I'm not going to go into this option in as much detail because I'm not as big of a fan of how it's used, although there is some purpose behind it. So all I'm going to do for the purpose of this video is just show you the basics. So this is again the first option, which will go in less detail. The more detailed one we'll go over in about 45 seconds. So you can go to the marketplace and get this HTTP request, and it's tied to this button. So you click this button on component tap, you'll drag in the HTTP request when it's been installed from the marketplace here. And then I have two toast dialogues. So in this HTTP request, I have the exact URL for this file. And then it's just a GET request, and that's all. For the toast message, I have the output of this node. So if you want to select binding, you can go to output, HTTP request, and then I've selected raw response body just to basically see everything. Then for the other one, I've done the exact same as far as the HTTP request, but I want to see the error message. So what we'll do is we'll click Get Data, and you'll see that we're getting an error here, failed because basically does this server accept cores. So I'm going to go through this exact same thing because this may actually be caching. But basically we're going to walk through the same process using this option here. So when we're in our application, it's the same process. This one isn't working, and I'm going to show you why it should be in just a moment. So in this case, you can typically start out with kind of like a generic API setup. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start from scratch so that we can build this together. So we will remove this, and we're going to add data resource, REST API direct integration. We'll name this, I'll just call it resource. And then I'll name the description the same thing. You can name yours whatever you need. Now we're going to grab our URL, and then we're going to go over here, paste it in, and then for me personally, I'm going to cut it off right around here, because in the next screen, I need to make sure that I'm specifying essentially the second half of the URL, because this could change based on the different records. You need to kind of play this one and see what makes the most sense. So in this case, I'll type in documents down here, and I'm going to go to test, run test. Now you'll see it's not returned in an array, but I am getting all of the data back. Now, many of you are likely going to be getting some kind of an error, and I'm going to show you why and how to fix it. So we're going to go into our htaccess, and we're going to save it, and then we're going to try to run this one more time. And usually after a moment or two, we might need to wait. Sometimes it'll start caching. But basically, some of you might get an error message here that says something along the lines of, does the server allow cores, or something like that. In that case, there is a website on Hostinger, or there's some kind of like a help article on if this is supported. So when you're on your Hostinger website, when you go into your public HTML folder, if this is the first time you've signed up, you are probably not going to have anything on this page except for a generic PHP file and an htaccess file, which is basically just a text document. So if you're getting that does the server allow cores error message, you can double click this file and paste in this content here, which you can get from the article on the website I'll link in the description. This is basically just enabling this cores support. Now, make sure that this is in line with your security and data handling policies. So this is obviously a pretty big change. So make sure that you're aware of what cores is and the ramifications of enabling it if it's something you're interested in doing. And again, follow any and all local, federal, relevant rules, regulations, laws, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and save this to make the change. And you'll see it's outside in the root directory. I'm ignoring all of these files because the only relevant file is what's in this test document, or in this test folder here. So you'll see that we have the data that's coming through. Now we're going to go to get record, and you'll see it's already set up for us. So what we can do here is I'm going to remove this /, and then the document, basically we just need to make sure that we know which document we're grabbing. So you'll see in this case, it's going to grab from this URL, and then it's going to grab the second half, or that's what we need to access. So we're going to grab this real quick. And you have a couple of options on how to do this, but my preference is to test it this way. And then if you want, you can save files elsewhere. So I'm going to show you what I mean. If we have this one file and all of our content, that works and we don't have any issues. But if we want to be dynamic and allow the user to select basically where they want to get the information from, I'll show you how to do that as well. So right now we have these three fields. We're going to click Set Schema from Response so our application knows where and how to get whatever it is that it needs to get. Now in this case, again, this get data request should work. I think my browser is going to be caching, so you'll just need to make sure you have cores set up for that. But again, I'm not covering that one in detail in this video. What we're going to be instead setting up is basically how to do more of a generic request to get the data. So we're going to use two different options. So the first option, which is basically just going to be loaded on page load, is going to be setting a page variable. So we're going to go ahead and add a page variable for loaded data. And then we're going to add a separate page variable, and we'll just call it ID because we're going to be using that later. Now, we have just some generic text here. So on page load, what we need to do is we need to go over here and we're going to set page variable, and you can just drag it over. And what we're going to do is we're going to set page variable loaded data. And then the assigned value, data variables, which you probably won't be able to grab until we've added it to our page. So we're going to click add resource. And you need to do this on any page where you need to grab that data variable. And then on page layout, we're going to set loaded data, and we're going to go to the assigned value. And then you can go to data variable, and you'll see resource 1 is incompatible. And that's because it's this giant object. So we're going to make it a little bit easier. And we're going to type in data. And you'll see we have resource 1 and then all of the fields. So in this case, you have the ability to scroll through and find the field that you're looking for. So in this case, let's just pick this one. When we set our schema from response, we got sample data. So we'll use this. Click save. And then what we're going to do is this is what's happening on page load. So we will go ahead and add in a text box, and it just says your data. So we'll make it a formula, and it's going to say your data, and this is static text because it's in double quotes, and then just space plus, and then we'll type in page vars loaded data. That way it'll load dynamically or load based on the frequency that we set. So in this case, you would basically just wait for this page to reload to get this data, and we'll see if we can clear our cache really quickly to get this working. All right, so I went ahead and switched into incognito window on Google Chrome, and one thing I wanted to note is I found the mistake that I made during this portion of the process. So I set the page variable, but I didn't really specify how to get it or what it was. So you'll see I said set loaded data, and then I said set it to this, but without actually retrieving that information, it doesn't have anything to save. So when we save our sample option here, or our sample data, you'll see it says undefined. So I'm going to walk you through how to get that really quickly. Now, it's a really simple addition. All we need to do is drop in this getRecord function, and if you drop it over top of the line, it'll automatically connect like this. So we're going to choose the get resource option, which again, if you don't see it, you just need to make sure you go to your data section and add it here. So we have this selected by default. If you have multiple, you can select the correct one. And then ID here is going to be a pretty critical part. Now, if you aren't quite sure what this is, if you go to get record, you'll see the relative path here. The ID is basically the second half of the URL. So you'll see we have up to codelessfix.app. So now what we need is everything after that /. So what we can do is we can type in /test/collection2.json. And then we'll click save. So now it's getting the information. And now we just need to set the assigned value, output of another node, get record, and just pick the field that you want and click save. Now when the app loads, you'll see we're getting whatever bit of information. In this case, it's grabbing 1111. So everything's working. So now we're going to do one more quick test. Let's just assign it to a different value. We'll pick value 2 and click save. And you'll see we get those letters, which are right up here. So the last thing to test is going to be checking and making sure that everything else is working as expected when we actually update the content. So let's find these letters here and let's try making a really quick edit so that we can see how this is going to impact our app. And then we'll save this content. Now, one thing to note with this is we've only set this app variable once. So when we refresh the page, typically that would be the time that it would actually update. But again, you would decide how frequently or when these fields are actually updating. So you'll see this time around when I updated it, it's now the updated text that we just added. Now, if you're interested, you have ways to update the frequency. So, for example, we're doing this on page load. You'll see we have get record, set page variable, and that's it. If you want, you can add in something like a delay, and then the delay, let's just leave it as the default. And then you'll see that it's going to create this loop similar to what you have when you go to your data variable tab here. So when you click on this on your page load, this delay means it's constantly getting the data in the background already. So we're just setting it to get and save that information. So now we're going to go to this page where it should be running that in the background. And we're going to just change this to hey and see if it grabs it automatically. And you'll see now it automatically updates. So when we make another change, like adding in another exclamation point, you'll see that it almost immediately updates. Now this is useful, but the downside is it's going to increase the traffic and usage on the websites that you're using. So bear that in mind when it comes to usage, because you can very easily run up costs on websites. Now, the last thing I want to cover with this app is making it a bit more dynamic, essentially with user information and allowing users to kind of interact. So let's do this really quickly. We'll just say collection name. So in this, we're going to bind the value to our page variable we set earlier called ID. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to our page layout and we're going to cut this so that it's no longer doing it on page load. Instead, it's going to do it when we click this button. And then what we're going to do is in this get record field, the ID here, we're going to bind it to our page variable ID. So if you see what we're doing now, when this page loads, nothing happens here. If I type in test/collection2.json, you'll see it says undefined. So basically what you need to do is you need to find out how do you get that actual information. So we can go to our data tab, get record, and you'll see /app/. So everything's loading correctly. All right, so this one is another fairly simple fix. So again, you'll see we have our input field here tied to the page variable ID. In this case, when I cut this logic, it broke a link, so I'm going to walk you through a simple fix for this. So you'll see we have get record resource, and it's right here we have the resource name, and the ID, I've bound it to a formula, which is just pagevars.id. In this case, this validation error is not relevant to us. Now, the page variable I've already updated, but when I previously changed it, since it was set to the output of another node, sometimes that link can get broken when you cut and move these. So what I did was I set the variable name and I basically just reset it. Set loaded data and then output of another node, get record, and you just choose the field that's relevant and click save. And that's all there is to it. So now what happens is I have this field here and you'll see it's currently undefined. If I paste this in, it goes to 1111, and it's just pulling based on the second half of the URL. So to walk through how you can use this, if users were, for example, typing in a username, like maybe their username was collection2, you can set the formula to automatically pull this in the back end. And just to kind of show this in action, we'll do one last edit here. and we'll save this change. And then on this end here, you would basically just be able to refresh your page. And when you paste in this new data, you'll now have the updated content. So I hope this was helpful. Again, I'm going to put a link to this in the description to help you understand whether or not you need to enable cores on your website, and also give you some more information. One thing to note, you may be able to, if you don't want to enable the cores resource sharing, you could also try to use this application and upload it directly to the same directory as your content that you're pulling from, and in theory that could also potentially resolve that error. But again, at this point in time, you can just create your JSON file. You are not limited to 3 or 4 fields or however many. You can use whatever you need. Just again, bear in mind usage cost, web traffic, and then following all relevant laws, rules, guidelines, etc. for data handling. But I hope this was helpful and helps you to create a more dynamic app. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment box below, and I'll see you all in the next video.